Hello, this is Carson Winter. We're back with the next test in the 2024 math group. Let's let's go over all the problems, tell you how to solve them, and if you have any questions, leave a comment or ask me in person. And I will try to explain things in more detail or in a way you personally can understand. With that said, I'll try to explain to the best of my abilities for the entire group, people watching this, and let's begin. Dennis drove to Lubbock, spent some time with her cousin. Ticket cost $815. She rented a car for 37.95 per day and 0.25 per mile. She stayed for 10 days, 225 miles. What's the total cost of the road trip? Well, you just got to add up all the values together. 37.95 times number of days, 0.25 times number of miles. Add them all together and you get B. Julian is taking calculus for the average. 40% is test average, 20% is semester average, and 40% is homework average. Julian's homework average is 91. Her test scores are as follow, and she needs a 90.0 or higher average. So we know that that 91 counts for 40% or 0.4 of the 90 that she needs. And then the 0.4 also comes from the average of the 4 test scores. So add them all together, divided by the 4 test scores there are, find the average, and then multiply that by 0.4 because it's 40% of your entire average. And then your unknown semester exam is also makes up 20%. So 0.2 times an unknown value has to get you a combined grade of 90. You use EQ solver to solve for x and you get 91. Consider the triangle ABC. Point D is the midpoint of BC. The y-intercept of AD is 0b. What is B? Well, this is this is just a line really. So figure out the slope and choose a point. So the slope, it goes up 5 from -4 to 1, and it goes over 13 from -8 to 5. So if you do that, then you will get a value of, then you'll get an equation with a slope of 5 over 13. And now choose a point. Let's just choose point A to make it easier. It has an x value of -8 and a y value of -4. So counteract that x and then subtract that 4, and that will be equal to your y. This is basically point slope form if you've ever learned of that. Makes things a lot easier on math tests. Now just plug in 0 and you get a value of -12 over 13. Okay, find the perimeter of ADC. Okay, there's stuff you can do to figure this out. We'll be using our shoelace program for 4 and 5 because that makes things easier. For this case, they want ADC, so you'll want to put in all the coordinates for A, D, and C respectively. So -8, 5, and 8 will go into L1 as those are your x values. Then -4, 1, and -6 will go into y as those, or L2 because those are your y values. Do that and you'll get, once you use the shoelace program, you'll get a perimeter of 37.7. You'll also get an area of 53. Now technically, I'm not mathematically sure. What I found is that the coordinate or the area of the other triangle is actually the same as the area of this one. I mean, like, wait, I got it right. Coincidentally, I believe the area of ADC and AEB are the same, but if they weren't, you'd have to put back in B or replace this C coordinate with this B coordinate and run the program again. And you do that. Find the measurement of ABC. In this case, you got to use another triangle program. Unfortunately, you can't just put in the coordinates this time. You have to put in the side lengths. So you have to use Pythagorean theorem to figure it all out. Change in x squared plus change in y squared. 16 squared plus 2 squared. Do that for all 3 of your sides. Put into SSS and you get an angle of 63 degrees for ABC. And then, find the longest median of ADC. This is pretty much the same thing. We also have a program for this, special segment, medians, and then put in all the sides, calculated the same method I mentioned earlier. Look for the longest one that it gives you, and it should be 14.6. Checking this to make sure I didn't mismark it. Okay, Riley went to ride a bike. She left Sudan and headed north for 12 miles, headed east for 6 miles, and south for 16 miles. Then she headed straight back to Sudan. She averaged 25 miles per hour. How long did the bike ride take? This is basically your path drawn out, 12 miles north, 6 east, 16 south. So our only unknown side is this triangle right here. Well, she's clearly gone 4 south and 6 to the side of her previous location, or 6 east and 4 south. So use Pythagorean theorem to figure out that length. Do that, add it to all the other sides. That'll get you how far she traveled. And now time is speed, or is distance over speed. So divide it by your speed of 25 and you get 1 hour and 39 minutes. 6. Donald can mow Oscar's property by himself 7.5 hours. He starts mowing at 4 and at 10 Jason comes to help. And they finish at 12. How long would it take Jason to mow Oscar's property himself? Okay, well in this case, basically this is a rate problem. Donald works at a rate of 1 property every 7.5 hours. And then Donald works at a rate of 1 property over an unknown amount of hours. Donald works for 4 hours. Oscar works for 2 hours. Or sorry, Jason. Oscar is the person's property name. You don't really need to know the names. Just keep track of who's who. Jason works for 2 hours. And that totals up to 1 property being completed. So solve for this x value. You get and then you have to multiply it by 60 to convert the minutes. And you get 257 minutes. 10. I'm not going to read all this out. You basically you just write the equation and fill in values. And then you can use EQ solver to figure it out. You're given V, you're given N, you're given R, you're given T. Just plug it in. Easy enough. 11. Consider the circles shown, minor arcs CE and BD. CE is 86 degrees, BD is 52 degrees, AB is 14, BC is 12, AD is 13. What is measurement of CAE? Well, the thing about these kind of angles right here, another geometry formula I can't prove, but this angle right here is equal to half of the larger angle that's formed, or larger measurement that's formed, minus the smaller measurement that's formed. So 86 minus 52 equals 34 divided by 2, and you get 17.0. If you don't remember that, it'll almost always end in a 0.5 or 0.0, so just keep that in mind. DE, this is another thing that's another aspect of circles and just another geometry formula I don't know how to prove. Sorry. Ask Ivan or look it up. Or maybe I'll solve it eventually if you really want it that bad, or if it helps you learn it. But basically, the outside of one of these segments times the entire one of one of these segments are equal regardless of which segment it is. In other words, AB times AC is equal to AD times AE. So you just plug that into your equation, and you do that, you solve for DE, and you get 15.0. 13 to 14, consider the circle shown. Measurement of ABC is 86 degrees, and BC, minor arc BC is 56 degrees, and then DAB is 62, and then ADC is 86. Yeah. Okay, so measurement of BCD. Now here, something you might remember about described angles is that the measurement of the arc that they cover is 2 times the measurement of the angle. So this 62 angle means that this arc BD will cover 124, 62 times 2. So now this angle here covers everything that's not covered by BD. As you can see, it covers from this B to this D, all the way around there. As a result, 62 times 2 plus this unknown angle times 2 has to be equal to the 360 degrees in your circle. So that formula is basically shown right here. Plug in your 62 degrees and solve for BCD. And you get 118 degrees. And then find the measure of minor arc AD, which is this right here. We'll be using similar stuff. This angle times 2 gets you the measurement of arc AC. And then once you have that, you need to subtract the measurement of arc CD from that to get AD. Subtract that. And so you figure out what you're subtracting. You know that BD, as we mentioned earlier, is 2 times this angle. Minus 56 will get you CD. That's basically what this is doing. AC minus CD, basically. And if you do that, you'll get a measurement of 120 degrees. Cone has a volume of that giant number and a diameter of that. What is the surface area? Well, we're given diameter. Let's find the height of the cone by using our cone formula. R squared times pi times height over 3 gets you volume. Solve for your height, and it will get you a height of 15. Then once you have that, you'll use formula for surface area. You need the circle at the bottom of the cone, so r squared times pi, as well as the non-circle surface area. I think it's called like lateral surface area. I don't really remember. So, and that's equal to the side length of the triangle that would be formed from it. So if I had a cone, if I was better at drawing cones, I could visualize it for you. Basically, you need to use Pythagorean theorem from the height and the radius. Figure out the length of that, the slant line of the cone. And then what you do is you multiply that by the circumference, so 26 pi, and divide by 2. And if you do that, you'll get a surface area of 1342. 16. Given triangle ABC with measurement of ABC is equal to 90, point D lies on AC such that measurement of ADB is 90 degrees as well. If AD is equal to 10, CD is equal to 18, do a bunch of stuff. Okay, first off, we need to find the perimeter. Welcome to more triangle formulas I can't prove, but I do know eventually because, I used to kind of be bad at geometry, but then I needed to learn all this stuff to perform well, so I did. But basically, BC, basically how this stuff works with a right angle here and a right angle of a point like this, is that this side, or basically DC times AC, has to be equal to BC squared. So 18 times 28 is equal to BC squared. And the same thing kind of applies for AB. 10 times the entirety of this 28 is equal to AB squared. So then once you have that, you can get the value of AB and BC and add it to the 28 you have, and you'll get a perimeter of 67.2. Now the area of BCD, well, now that we know BC, we can use Pythagorean theorem to figure out BD. So whatever you got, so whatever it was for BC, I probably should have wrote it down, but BC squared minus this DC squared of 18, and then that will get you this side here. Then you multiply it by DC and divide by 2 because it's a triangle, and you'll get an area of 121. Okay, given triangle DEF with DE is equal to 16, EF is equal to 24. Point G lies on DF such that FG is 16 and EG bisects angle DEF. What is DG? This was a similar problem to what appeared last test. I'll tell you how you solve it first of all. The proportion of this GF and this, whenever there's an angle bisector like this, the proportion of this GF over this EF has to be equal to the proportion of this DG over this DE. In other words, 16 over 24 is equal to X over 16. So you do that by 16 over 24 times 16 to get X. Now for why that works, I explained it a bit in the last test, but this is one of the few geometry things that I can prove. So I'd like to share it with you, hopefully help you understand. This is how angle bisectors work is that these two angles are well, these two angles are supplementary. So that means that if this angle was 60 degrees, for example, this angle would be 120. Now, sine of these supplementary angles is always the same. So as a result, the law of sines gets an interesting combination. You know this angle is split, so these two angles are the same. This sine of these two angles are the same, so 24 over your sine of this same angle times sine of this same angle gets you this side right here. So the divided by and multiplied signs are by the same, and therefore it's just a proportion multiplied by a constant. So that's why it works. And if you do that, you get a value of 32 over 3. Measurement of GEF is what? Well, now that you have DG, you can use our SSS program, putting in DF this time for, why did I put ABC? No, it's DEF, sorry. Triangle SSS for DEF, put in all the sides. Get the angle for DEF and then divide it by 2 because it was bisected. And you get 40.5. Some of the measurement of the interior angles of an isogon, 20 sides, is what? Well, if you think about types of shapes, you know that a triangle has 180 degrees, a square has 360 degrees, pentagon has 540 degrees. I think you can clearly see the pattern. The formula for sum of interior angles basically boils down to 180 times the number of sides minus 2. Do that, and you'll get 3,240 degrees as your sum. 21, the length of a side is 8, and it's inscribed in a circle. What is the area of the isogon? So this is an area of regular polygon. So side squared times number of sides, 20, over 4, over tangent of 120 over the number of sides. This is in degrees mode, obviously. And then if you do that, you'll get a value of 2020.4. And then the area of your circle. This is another graph that I used to try to explain it. Of course, I'm not very good. But basically, you can draw a triangle given the side length of your isogon and the radius of your circle. This is kind of what it looks like inscribed. If I continue the drawing out. I'm sorry, I'm not very good at drawing, but especially on this PDF editor. But hopefully it's good enough to understand. This is the entire side of the triangle. And the radius of the circle is the measurement, or is the length of the hypotenuse that would be formed. So basically CSC, or cosecant, so sine of 180 over 20, power to -1, times this side right here, which is going to be half of the entire side because it's dual-sided. So inverse that value, multiply it by 8, divide by 2, and that'll get you the radius of your circle. Then once you have that, radius squared times pi gets you 2054. Hawk is perched at the edge of a roof of Three Rivers. The hawk spots the mouse at an angle of depression 37 degrees, and he's 100 feet from the base of the bank. How tall is the river stank bank? Basically, what this formula, or basically, we're just making a triangle here. It's not too complicated. The mouse is 100 feet away, so this is 100. This is 37 degrees. That's what angle of depression is. It just wants this side. Tangent of 37 times 100. Do that, you get 75 feet and 4 inches. Given f inverse of x is that equation right there. F -1 is 12. Evaluate f of -3. Well, we can plug in 1 for this x in the f inverse and solve for this b, making assigned equal to 12. That's done right here. EQ solver, and you get a value of b is equal to 5. Then once you have that, you successfully have your inverse f equation. So now f of -3, the inverse of an inverse cancels each other out. So let's take the inverse of this equation right here. So 7x plus 5 over -2x plus 3 gets you a 3. I did fix that, right? Yeah, I just mistyped it. it will get you a value of -3. So if you do that, you'll get a value of x equals -14. Or really, it would make more sense to write y here, but whatever. You hopefully understand inverses enough to know what I'm doing there. 25, at the graduation ceremony, 6 chairs are in a row, and Madison wants to sit next to Jason. How many seating arrangements are possible? Well, like I mentioned on the previous test, it's best to imagine Madison and Jason as one person, or Jackson, sorry, as one person. So now you only have 5 people. So 5 factorial, 5 different ways, 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. And then now that Madison can either be before or after Jackson, so you multiply by 2. So 120 times 2 equals 240. Consider the circle. Center of the circle is point -46. Diameter is 18. What is A plus B plus C? Well, if the center of the circle is those points, we can write it in terms of an equation. So x plus, we're counteracting the -4 part and the +6 section of y, so that center of circle happens at x equals -4 and y equals 6. And then once you do that, how it works is that if this was indeed 9 away, or the radius of 9 away, it would have an x value of -5, or it would have or -13 or 5, and therefore would become 9 squared. So this also has to be 9 squared to match that radius. So now that you have that, you can expand your equation and solve for all the values. Do that and you get -33. Find a number that is 3/4 of the way from -2 1/3 to 5 5/6. Well, first off, we need to figure out, we're going to start at -2 1/3, and we need to go 3/4 of the way. So we need to go 3/4 of the distance between this number and that number, which is done by subtracting the smaller number from the bigger number. So 5 plus 5/6 minus -2 1/3. Multiply that by 3/4 and add it to the original smaller value, and you get 91/24. The equation of the line that is equidistant from those 2 points is in standard form. What is B plus C? A line equidistant to 2 points is the perpendicular bisector between those points, basically. So the slope from point A to point B is change in y over change in x, so -15/12. And then the midpoint is the average of x and y, so 1 and 1.5. And now for perpendicular bisectors, the slope is the inverse of the original slope multiplied by -1. So 12/15, or -15/12 converts to 12/15. This is simplified a bit. And then x minus 1 plus 1.5. Then you just rearrange things a bit, rewrite your equation a few times, and you get a value of -5 as your B plus C. Wait, hold on. Hold on, what? Give me a second. Did I make a mistake? I did make a mistake. What did I do? This is -10, right? This is -10, and then that means that a minus 1 point. I'm sorry, -10, and then their midpoint is 1 and -1.5, so it's +7. Okay, sorry. I did make a mistake there. My apologies. So it's -3 after all. Once you have, so I rearranged the equations wrong, my bad. And so now this is your actual equation. Add B and C to get -3. I originally added the 8 at the beginning as well, so I got a wrong answer. Anyway, let's move on. 29. Number of ways 10 chairs can be arranged on a charm bracelet. Okay, how things work for this is that normally, even in a circle and chair. Okay, well, first off, and whenever you talk about rows, you have to deal with all 10 ways. Whenever you're dealing with a circle, you only care, it doesn't matter which direction you go. For a charm bracelet, it doesn't matter where you start, period. So it's basically the 10 factorial ways a charm could be arranged in a row divided by the 10 starting points. And then also divided by the 2 ways it can go as well. So 9 factorial over 2. Consider the parabola with vertex 3, 4 and a focus at 5, 4. Point 11b lies on the graph. B is greater than 0. Then what is B? Okay, you'll notice that normally the focus is actually a change in x, which should raise some red alarms because normally the focus is right above a parabola, and so the y changes. So that means to make things easier, we'll be flipping the x and y's on everything we do here. So let's imagine this point was 4, 3, and this one 4, 5. So that do you have that? Your focus distance is 2. Your focus is based on the equation of I guess this would make more sense as A times 4 power to negative 1 equals 2. You'll get an A value of 1/8. So that's going to be attached to your x squared. So 1/8 x minus 4, because that's where your vertex is with the swap point, and then plus your newfound y of 3. And that will get you the point of B11. You do that, solve for B, and you get a value of 12. 31 to 32. The vertices of an ellipse are 2 and negative 4 and 10 to negative 4. The length of the minor axis is 6. What the eccentricity of the ellipse is what? Well, how this works is first off, we need to figure out the length of the minor and major axis arcs. So then the minor axis is given as 6, but the major axis we have to figure out by the distance between these 2 points. So 2 and 10 has a distance of 8. So distance from the center of the circle is 4. Distance from the center since the minor axis crosses the center of the circle, you have to divide that by 2 as well. Then we use our equation for eccentricity, major axis squared minus minor axis, I guess, squared over major axis. I kind of just simplified it so it's radiuses instead of axes. But regardless of what you do, you get a value of 0.66. And then find the distance from the center of the ellipse to that line. Well, we've done plenty of this stuff from distance from points to lines for standard form, so we got to convert this to standard form. So 4y minus 3x minus 24 is equal to 0, and the center of the circle isn't very hard to find. It's 6, 4. Center of your x's and this y stays the same. So then you use our dot product thing, multiply x's and multiply y's. 6 times negative 3, 4, and negative 4. Then subtract this 24 right here. So or add it because it's on the left side. And then you take it over the Pythagorean theorem of these two coefficients squared. So yeah, do that and you get a value of 11.6. My clock shows that it's exactly 3 o'clock. How long will I have to wait until both hands of my clock point in the same direction for the second time? Well, we have a clock program that will get you the amount of time it takes for them to overlap the first time. So you'll use your clock program, put in 3 hours, 0 minutes, and then you have to add a constant of 360 over 5.5. I'm not going to derive that for you right now, but basically that'll be how long it takes for them to repeat being in the same direction. So if you do that, you add that constant to the original time you get, and you get 81 minutes and 49 seconds. 34, a population of Goliath bird-eater spiders is increasing exponentially in Guyanese country. Anthony introduced a population of N bird eaters at time equals 0. Time equals 60 was 72. Time equals 150. Population reached 374. Find N. So since it's exponential, the equation has to match a times b powered to something. So in other words, there's an exponent here. So we're given a lot of stuff, so I'm going to try to explain this the best I can. After 90 days, the population was multiplied by 374 over 72. I hope you can understand that, because after 90 days, it went from 72 to 374. That's going to be the exponent we use. And then it took 90 days, so we divided by 90 to counteract that. And then we start at, because we subtract time 60 from the time, if we put time 60 days, this exponent will be 0, multiplying by, so any number powered to 0 is 1, and then you can multiply it by your clean 72 to get a value of 72, which represents this point right here. So now that once we've made that equation, we can plug in time equals 0 and get a value of 24 for n. And I guess on the other side, if you plugged in 150, this will get you an exponent of 1, which 374 over 72 powered to 1 is the same thing. So you're just doing multiplication at that point. That's kind of where it's derived from. A ball is dropped from 200 feet on each bounce. Ball rebounds 3/5 of its height. How far does it rebound on the 12th bounce? So after each bounce, it rebounds 3/5, so 3 over 5 powered to 12 bounces times your 200 feet, and then times 12 to convert to inches. You get a value of 5. The equation of this conic is 2x squared plus 6xy minus y squared plus 4x plus 6y plus 12 equals 0. First off, what is the conic? Whenever you're given x squared and y squared, it's always either an ellipse, a hyperbola, or two lines. It may be able to be a singular line, but I don't think it can. I'm not sure about that. But basically, as it happens, when one is subtracted, it's a hyperbola. When the other one is added, it is sometimes an ellipse and sometimes a hyperbola and sometimes two parallel lines. I'll explain how to figure that out when it becomes relevant on a future test in this section. So, but yes, for now, since you're subtracting one, you can guarantee that's a hyperbola. Which hyperbolas are equations that look like that, by the way. And what is the angle of rotation? Another equation I don't know proof of. Cotangent of 2 times your angle of rotation is equal to your x minus your y over your xy. So 2 minus -1 over 6. Use EQ solver for theta and you get 31.7. 3 times the complement of angle A exceeds the supplement by 18. What is the measurement of angle A? Well, just write that equation. 3 times the complement, so 90 minus A, is equal to 18 plus the supplement, so 180 minus A. Do that, solve for A, and you get 36 degrees. 39, consider the graph shown on the right. Equation of y equals f of x is in the form c plus a sine of bx. What is a plus b plus c? Well, we have to look at some attributes of this equation given. So, one thing you should note is that it goes from -2 to 4, which means it has to have a height of, which means from bottom to top it's a height of 6, which means it's a distance from 6 from your center. In other words, that means your amplitude is 3 and your A value is 3. Then, like we said, the center happens at y equals 1. So your C value is just a constant 1. And then to figure out B, we need to figure out how long it takes till it repeats. Hopefully you can see the entire thing repeats at a distance of, if you look down here, going from pi to -pi to 0 and 0 to pi, so a distance of pi. Normally, a sine function has a period of 2 pi, so b has to be equal to 2 to convert it to pi. So then, once you do that, add them all together. 3 plus 1 plus 2 gets you 6. Graph of g equals yada yada yada, intersects the graph at that point. What is EF? For 40, 42, and 43, we're going to be using our Oxor program. So plug these two things into y1 and y2. We just solved for the equation 39. Then we'll use our Oxor. You'll be able to find these inputs just fine. And then your line of revolution, as stated in problem 43, will be negative pi. So then you'll give you the distance between the 2 points. I didn't actually circle that. What did I do? Or what's the answer? You should get a value of d or 1.41. And it will get, for the area under curve, it should give you 2.7, and it should give you a revolution line of 40, area of 40, yeah. Then 41 requires a bit more work. The x-intercept of the line tangent to the graph of g of x when x is equal to pi over 6 is what? Well, tangent line is based on the slope at that given point, so find a derivative at that point, pi equals x over 6. And then that slope is, then we can use point slope form. So your slope times x minus your x point plus your y point. So x minus pi over 6 plus g of pi over 6, and figure out when that equation is equal to 0. Do that, and you will get a j value of 0.25. 44, the derivative of the function f of x is defined by f prime is equal to this thing right here. If it's continuous, or if f of x is continuous, then the maximum value of f of x for 2 pi to 4 pi is what? Well, how derivatives work is basically to go from the derivative, or f prime, to f, you have to take the integral of your function. In other words, that if the area, if you're, in other words, those positive values of f prime make it bigger over time, while the negative values make it smaller. So, and from 2 pi to 4 pi, the area under the curve is negative, which means it's always getting smaller. Therefore, the maximum value in that range has to be the original 2 pi. Because the negative slope keeps making it become less and less, basically. Let y equals f of x be the solution to this equation. With the initial condition, find the approximation for f of -1 using Euler's method with 2 equal steps starting at x equals 0. Well, we have our approximation program for this. Put this equation into y1. Yes, you can put a y, it's okay. Use the approximation program, Euler's method. You are having 2 equal steps. You're starting at x equals 0 and y equals 3, and you're looking for f of -1. Do that, and you'll get a value of 0.625. 46, okay, given this equation right here, y is equal to -1 when x is equal to 0. Find the value of y when x is equal to 2. You can, if you want, actually solve this equation. You'd have to divide each side by 3 minus y, then take the integral of each side. Or multiply by this dx over here. That means you can now take the integral of both y and x and do all that stuff. Or you can use an approximation method with 1,000 steps. I'll let you choose. I personally choose the approximation method, especially when all these answers are so far away. So y1, approximation, Euler, and then 1,000 steps, starting at x equals 0, y equals -1, and looking for x equals 2. 47, consider the graph of f of x shown on the right. Arrange them in order from least to greatest. Okay, I'll try to explain this to the best of my abilities. It's a bit hard to explain with words, but basically, anything that includes BC is going to make it less negative, and this integral area under curve is positive. So the smallest one is going to be the thing that only contains this negative area. So 4 is going to be the smallest. That automatically eliminates everything that's not C and D. So from then on, both of them have the answer choice 2 is next, which it makes sense because going from here to here has both this positive area and this negative area. And then it's a battle between which is greater, 1 and 3, or 1 or 3. Well, integral area from 0 to b is just going to be this giant thing, which is pretty big. However, the integral from 0 to c of the absolute value of this function means that it's going to flip this negative area to become a positive area. So in fact, 3 has an actually greater area under the curve than 1. So it adds up this area plus this now positive area, while the original only takes this one right here. So as a result, 1 is your next smallest and 3 is your largest. Consider this polar curve. Find the area of the region in the fourth quadrant, bounded by the graph of this polar curve and the x-axis. Well, how do I put it? Because of the way this equation is written, r will always be greater than or equal to 0. Therefore, we know that the fourth quadrant is always going to be from 3 pi over 2 to 2 pi because 0 starts here, and then the r value, I guess I'm not going to explain entirely how polar equations work right now. But basically, at pi equals 0, it'll be pointing out this way. Pi equals pi over 2, it'll be pointing up. Pi, it'll be pointing left. 3 pi over 2, it'll be pointing down. 2 pi, it'll be pointing right again. So you're looking for the integral from 3 pi to 2 pi of r squared over 2. That's the that's the equation for area of a polar equation. Do that and you get a value of 1.6. The y-intercept of the line tangent to the graph of this polar curve is the point 0b. B is equal to what? Well, first off, we can figure out the derivative at that point by our calculator, actually. So if you go to graph, press second calculate, you can and draw on polar form by going to mode and then polar. You can actually just calculate you can actually just figure out dy over dx, and it'll give you negative 0.414213. Now finding x and y is a bit harder. The x value of a polar equation is going to be equivalent to cosine of your angle times your polar equation. And that kind of offsets the change in theta or change in direction for your equation. And you do the same thing for y, sine instead of cosine, times your equation. And you'll get these values for this value for your x and this value for your y. And then you can just use point slope form to get a value of negative 0.36. 50, the radius of a sphere is increasing at 9.2 inches per minute. What's the volume at the instance the volume is increasing by 462? Well, radius cubed times 4 over 3 pi is equal to volume. So let's take the derivative of that with respect to time. So 3 times r squared times dr over dt times 4 over 3 pi has to be equal to the change in volume over time, the dv over dt. So now you just plug in all the values you know. You know 3 times your dr over dt times 4 over 3 pi is equal to 462. You can find that r is equal to 2, and then plug it back into this volume equation to get 33.5 inches cubed. Find the radius of convergence for the series. This is basically, we need to make sure that this thing over here does not overpower 4 power to n plus 1. In other words, this equation, x plus 3, cannot, the absolute value of that has to be less than 4. Otherwise, it'll exponentially overpower it, and it won't converge. So as a result, the x can be from negative 7 to 1. It can, in fact, be equal to negative 7, because this 1 over n, if you learn more about converging series, you'll understand better, but for now, it doesn't really matter if it can be exactly that or not. The radius, there's a distance of 8, so the radius is 4. Ron just purchased a certified used car. Salesman told him that in the coming year, the probability being a transmission issue is that. Another issue is that, and braking issue is 0.06. If they're independent, what's the probability that none of them happen? Well, the probability that something doesn't happen is 1 minus the probability that it happens. So 1 minus 0.03 times 1 minus 0.06 times 1 minus 0.02. Gets you a value of 0.894. 53, find sum of the mean, median, and mode for tire B. You'll just want to put these values into Y1 and use one variable stats for tire B. And then that'll get you the median and mean. And then you have to manually find the mode of, in this case, 50,200. And you'll get 151,500 if you do that. Now find the IQR of the tire A results. In this case, interquartile range is the third quartile minus the first quartile. So Q3 minus Q1 in one variable stats. And that'll get you a value of 600. Make sure you're using tire A instead of tire B now. And 55, assume all the conditions for inference are met. An appropriate test was conducted to see if tire B's do last longer than tire A. What is the p-value of this test? Well, you're given 2 independent data sets, so that means you're using a 2-sample t-test. So you'll want to put the data into L1 and L2, then go to stat, test, and then 2-sample t-test, and you'll use data mode, which will allow you to just put in the list. And then you can put the tire A is less than tire B. In length, if you put the wrong thing on accident, it's okay. Just subtract the p-value you get by 1, or 1 minus your p-value. And you'll get a value of 0.044. Okay, 56. 7, assumed distribution of heights is approximately normal. Mean 70, standard deviation 5.5. Mark is 5 feet 6 inches tall. What percentile is he at? Well, let's figure out the probability that someone is taller than Mark. So his height, our lower bound we're looking for is his height, so 5 times 12 plus 6 inches. The upper bound is infinity, anything that's taller than him. The mean is 70 inches, standard deviation is 5.5, so use normal CDF for that. Distribute, or second DISTR, and normal CDF. Plug in those values and subtract it by 1, and that'll get you the probability that someone's taller than Mark. So the probability that someone is less than Mark, or his percentile, is 23%. And then what is the IQR for that data set? Well, the IQR is the middle 50 is the distance between the middle 50%, because Q3 is a 75th percentile and Q1 is 25th percentile. In other words, do inverse norm an area of 0.5 in the data we mentioned earlier. Look for the center. That'll get you the middle 50% of data. So you subtract the bounds they give you and you get 7.42. 58, a chi-square test. This is kind of fun. They believe that they're sold equally, and they randomly select 100 students to ask them to identify their favorite type of pie, and the results are mentioned above. And what is the p-value of her chi-square test? Well, what you do is, first off, you figure out how much of each thing is expected. So if they're equally distributed, each pie should have 20 people who like them. So your expected is 20. Then you figure out their actual value, subtract it by that 20, square it, and divide by the 20 again. And you do that continually, and that'll get you your chi-squared value. And then to figure out your p-value, you use your chi-squared CDF of your chi-squared value, infinity, and then your df is going to be the number of data or number of things subtracted with 1 subtracted off it. And if you do that, you'll get a p-value of 0.007. How much did the blueberry cell contribute? Well, blueberry was 10, so 10 minus 20 squared over 20 is 5. Sarah rolls a fair dice 10 times. What's the probability she will get a 5 at least 3 times? Okay, so she rolls a fair dice 10 times. Binomial CDF will give you the probability that an event occurs that many times or less. So there are 10 trials that are happening. The probability of getting a 5 is 1 over 6 because there are 6 possibilities on a dice. And we're looking for 2 or less for that. Because the probability of something is 3 or more is 1 minus the probability that's 2 or less. Hopefully that makes sense. So do that, subtract it by 1, and you get a value of 0.225. All right, well, that's the entire test. I hope you enjoyed. If you want any more specific explanations or in-depth explanations, leave a comment or ask me in person. Hope you enjoyed the video. Goodbye.